Okay guys, I want to give you a breakdown on my 57 Chevy. This car's been a huge part of my life for a long time. I think I bought this car maybe 12, 13 years ago. It's got a pretty good story about the car. This car used to drive around when I was in high school, and on the license plate it said Fonz. And the guy's last name that actually drove this car around, his last name was Fonz. So it was kind of ironic, with that last name. It was just really kind of stood the car out amongst anything around town. Plus, I'm a big 57 Chevy fan anyway. But the story was that the car had gotten parked, and over 20 years I hadn't seen the car, 15 years I hadn't seen the car. And lo and behold, one of my buddies wound up buying this car, John Salter. And I wound up finding the car at his lot, because he has a car lot. And I asked him, I go, hey, what do you want to do with that car? He said, well, if you want it, you can buy it. So I went ahead and bought the car. And it just seems like it's been one thing after another with the car since I bought it. I think what's drove me to being such a huge fan of a 57 Chevy, number one, is I remember my dad taking me to a friend of his house back in probably the late 70s. And he had the most badass 57 Chevy gasser I've ever seen in my life. I walked in his shop, and I remember I was so little that all I could see was the Bel Air fin on the back of the car. And I remember looking up at it going, this car is gorgeous. This is a beautiful car. But that 57 Chevy gasser really kind of intrigued me, 57 Chevy, like for my entire life. There was a movie that came out in probably the early 80s. It was called Hollywood Nights. Tony Danza, Michelle Pfeiffer. There's a lot of people that probably know what I'm talking about, but if those of you that don't know, in the movie there was a car that was a 57 Chevy, two-door sedan, 210, just like this car, that had a small block Chevy with a blower sticking out of the hood. That was the notorious car that they would yearly change things about the car. It was in Hot Rod magazine. It was in all the magazines through probably clear back in, I think, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way to current. So every year they upgraded something on this Project X car, is what they called it. It was the Project X. That movie was such a perfect time, because the thing about a 57 Chevy or the Tri-5 cars was all-American. It was an all-American feeling. The 55, 6, and 7 Chevy were, to me, probably one of the top leading cars iconically in America. The 1957 Chevy, for sure, iconically, is probably the most notorious car out there. At that time, Ford was building the 57 Ford. They were really trying to compete with the 57 Chevy. I think Chevy actually outsold Ford that year. It was just because the car body style was so beautiful. Nothing against the Ford. The 57 Ford was a cool car too, but the sexy body lines of a 57 Chevy and how wide they are and how low they sit on the ground, and the fin on the back. These cars are like a affordable Cadillac, if you want to think of it like that. The 57 Chevy had the 150, the 210, and the Bel Air. So the Bel Air, of course, was the nice car. It had all the bells and whistles. And if you look right here on the Bel Air, they didn't have this post. So this was all open right here. And they had a flipper right here. So when you would open the door, this would flip up. It was a stainless steel piece right here. Made it a little bit classier. And because this is a sedan, the front windshield won't fit, the rear windshield won't fit a Bel Air. None of that will fit. They all look the same, but they won't fit. They won't interchange. 1957, another reason why I'm a huge fan of the 57 was the first year of the 283. So 1955, they came out with the 265, which was the first V8 engine that they put in basically the Chevrolet. Now Cadillac had a V8 prior to that, which the guy that designed the Cadillac motor came in and helped design the 265, which then turned into the 283. So the cool thing back in 1957 was the fuel injection on these. Now the fuel injected motor above the rest of them would make 1 horsepower per cubic inch. So if it was a 283, it made 283 horsepower, which was a hot rod motor back then. You got to think, prior to this economical, affordable motor was a Ford flathead V8, which killed it for 25, 30 years. The flathead cornered the market on the V8 forever, as far as affordable V8. So this small block Chevy has now become what we know as like the LS motors and the LSs. So it went from the 265, 283, the 307, the 305, the 350 to the 400. And then now we've got these LS motors that are based off basically the same almost design as the small block Chevy. Now the LS motor is kind of funny because it's actually designed kind of like a Ford motor also. Ford guys will probably take credit for that and love it, which it's true. I mean, if you look at the motor, it is designed a little bit like a Ford motor. But it all originated from this right here. It all originated from a 265, and it's gone up. So what we've done here is, when I had the 283 in here, the rear main seal was leaking, the tired motor in it, it had miles on it. I decided to put a crate motor in it. So I went down, I bought a crate small block Chevy, nothing special. I put a camshaft in it, some valve springs, and it sounded good. Had a little cam in it. I put a turbo 350 transmission in it. And then I got bored with that, so I decided, well, let's put a supercharger on it. So I put a little Wyand under the hood supercharger in this thing, which really woke the car up. The car probably made 400 horse. It was a lot of fun. I kept breaking the stock rear ends in it. After a while, I talked to a friend of mine, R&R Frames, and I said, hey, look, I'm looking at maybe doing a Corvette drivetrain in this thing. And so I got all C4 Corvette drivetrain underneath this car. And then I put the LS motor in it. And then we put a stock LS 4L60 in it, drove the car around, had a great time. It's got air conditioning. I could cruise it back and forth to California. It was a good time. The car was a good time. But you know how things go. You get bored, you want more horsepower. So I put a camshaft in it. Then I put the valve springs in the LS motor. Bumped up the horsepower, probably made 480 horse. Ran it around like that for a while, and got a little bored. So I decided, well, let me put a turbo on it. So, you know, with the turbocharger comes water meth injection, change out the radiator. You better put a different transmission in it because the 4L60 didn't last very long with the turbo. So then you got to go to a 4L85, and then you got to put an expensive converter in it. And, you know, it's just one thing after another, to the point of, you know, the car's making 800 horsepower now, and it's fun, but 450 horse is really fun too. You know what I mean? So it's like, what do you want to do? How far can you go? Now it's like, you know, it gets a little warm once in a while, so I'm always working on little details to try to keep the car cooled down, because, you know, when you put 12 pounds of boost through this car for very long, it's definitely going to want to heat up a few things in the engine. So, you know, it's still fun. You get out there on the road, and some dude pulls up next to you in a GT Mustang or a Camaro, and you smoke his ass in an old piece of shit like this. It's kind of fun. There's something to be said about the being proud of being able to build a car like this in your shop, spend the time to create and build something that competes with these cars that General Motors has literally spent billions of dollars designing a Camaro to run that good. And, you know, we take it to the WelderUp shop, throw a bunch of shit at it, and we can actually beat them. That's pretty cool. But it's been a fun old car. You know, there's a bullet hole in the trunk from a keg party this guy was at, and they started shooting at this car, and I left the bullet hole in it. The paint job on this, everybody wants to know if it's a wrap. This is not a wrap. We brought it in the shop. I told Travis Dieter, I said, look, I want to make this car look really old. Just take the old rust that we have in it, and let's drip it and fade it, and just really give it like a good patinaed look. And so Travis went through it. He did an amazing job. Matter of fact, it's probably one of the greatest things about the car that people love the most is when I pull up somewhere, they think, oh man, I think it's such a rusted out piece of junk, but it's not that bad. I mean, I did leave the rust in the quarter panels down here. As you can see, I wanted to leave that. That's all original, old, rusted out crap. I've had to bow the fenders out, literally pull these out, hammer them in to get a wider tire in it. This is not my race. I have a tire that's a little wider for racing in, but as you can see, it's still pretty close right here. This is just a drivable tire that I have on it. Now, another thing, usually on the Bel Airs, they have the gold trim like this. Okay, you can see this one's stainless, this one's gold. The stainless was usually the 150 and the 210. The Bel Airs came with the gold. So this is actually a Bel Air piece. And then the insert right here, this would have been gold too. Inside of here would have been the Bel Air. But as you can see, I've changed and done what I wanted to this car. These actually right here were air vents back in the old days. So you could open up a vent and the air would come in here and go all the way through and on your feet and inside the car to keep you cooled down when you're driving around. And then with the big turbo that I have on it, the amount of heat that this car takes on, I put some vents in right here, and then I opened up the turbo here to try to get rid of some of the heat because it's so hot. Now this car has like been through one thing to another. It's almost to that point where you kind of want to take it all out and start all over again. But it's like Project X. This is a car that I've learned so much on over the last 12 years that it's really become a special piece in the shop. People love it. They've seen it on TV and they think it's so cool. But what we have on here is a Garrett 67 millimeter turbo. Right now we got it tuned at about 12 pounds of boost. The car makes about 800 horse to the dyno, to the rear wheels. It's got an LS3 in it. And we've got some, right here is all our water meth injection. So under a certain amount of boost, it sprays the water meth in here, which initially cools down things and gives us a little bit more horsepower. Okay, so the cool thing that I found out about this family car was that, back in 1957, this was basically like the Tahoe. This was the family car. Everybody loved it. You could get all your friends and family in it, but it still had a really classy look to it because you were on the verge of looking like you're rich, like you own a Cadillac, but you have a car that is affordable that looks like a Cadillac. But they never had very cool wheels on them. I never thought that they ever had. The hubcaps were okay, but their wheels were never that cool. So when I redid this car, I wanted to put a really nice set of wheels on it. And so I put the Butnick wheels on it. Alan Butnick is a friend of mine. I've been buying Butnick wheels seriously since 1990 was the first year I put a set of wheels on my little short box Chevy truck. But the wheels look really good. They kind of have like almost the same color in the car as the wheels. So Alan went ahead and powder coated them to basically match the car. And it turned out really good. As you can see here on the rear wheel, which I'm gonna put this thing on the lift so we can get up underneath it. The thing about the C4 Corvettes is the rear ends are really wide. So you don't get a lot of lip on the outside. Like a hot rod car always seemed like it had 6 inches of dish in the rear to kind of give it that hot rod look. So I've always been fighting that, but we got a little bit here. You can see that the wheel inside is like that, and my outer lip is only like this. So I wish it was the other way around, but it don't work that way with the Corvette rear end. But anyway, let's go through this interior really quick. As you can see, it's got a center console right here. It's got air conditioning in it. It's got a system in it. Now this system will beat you out of the car. And we'll go through that. I'll show you that here in a minute. The foot pedals down here, I thought it'd be really cool to put some, I had some old dirt bike foot pegs off one of my old dirt bikes. I TIG welded them together right here, welded them on, and put this all together just so your foot doesn't slip off when you're racing. This is the 210 version, so it had a delete clock, delete radio. a lot of these, there's so many options. Believe it or not, in these cars, there is so many options you could have had back in 1957. As you can see, I put a tilt column in here for drivability. The power steering, the power brakes work really great on this car, actually. It's full roll caged. This car is caged up where, you know, if you want to go run 9 seconds in this car, you should be able to do it no problem. It's got Momo seat belts in it, 5-point, so you know you're pretty safe when you're in this car driving it around. Right here we got our little drift brake in it, so if you want to get up on a corner, pull the lever and drift a little bit, you can drift. It's kind of a neat option. Me and Justin decided he put one in his Lark, and I decided to put one in my 57 Chevy so we can go drift these cars a little bit. The car now has a 4L80 transmission in it. So it actually, you know, it really runs good. On boost, this car pulls so hard, it feels like the front tires are wanting to come off the ground. And then I put some race seats in it so you could get in this thing and feel comfortable. These seat belts lock you in. So if you're out cruising around and you get in a beat down somewhere, you know, if you happen to go into the wall, you want to be able to know that you're not going to come out of this thing, because these cars are all metal. You know, no seat belts. Back in the day, you hit that dashboard, your teeth are gone, for sure. And the reason why I know that is because my dad lost his teeth in one of these cars. It was a 56 Chevy, and he knocked his teeth out on the steering wheel. There's no give on any of this stuff. There's no airbags, nothing like that. You can see in the back there, there's 4 speakers. And then there's some in the trunk, which we'll go through, and I'll show you in the trunk what's going on. You know, the car was kind of cool. I've always kind of thought maybe I should have put a headliner in it, but I really like this old mohair headliner. It's vintage, you know, it's kind of whipping in the wind when you're going down the road, and it still reminds you that you're driving in a car that's, you know, 60 years old. It's really cool. Let's get in the trunk now. This is my trunk key. You're gonna see in here. I have to edit this a little. Because you know what the problem is? My eyesight's getting bad. I can't see shit. All right. There we go. So as you can see, we got some Memphis audio in here. 3 10-inch subwoofers in the rear that actually bumps super hard. A couple of amps right here. We got our water meth right here. So this is full of water meth for full-on boost when we're hauling ass and beating the Mustangs and the Camaros down the road. So my buddy Andrew at Industry Auto installed this system, actually built the box, put the floor in it. He was pretty proud to be able to rat rod out my stereo system in here. He said, I'm usually used to working on Ferraris, brand new Benzes, lifted trucks. Never has he had an opportunity to do this, so him and his wife had a great time decorating and putting the wood in the trunk. It turned out really good though. When we put this in, we thought it would be really cool to use this old steering column out of a Model T. Here's your timing controls on here. We ran all our wiring through here all the way into the car. So it actually worked out really good, and it's just a conversation piece. It's pretty neat. Now that you guys have seen the beats in the trunk, let's put on the lift and check out the undercarriage. So these subframes are used a lot in different applications. This is an original 57 Chevy frame. It's a one piece. A lot of guys call them a California frame, but they are a one piece frame. A lot of times the Tri-5 Chevys came with a two piece. This is a one piece. And then as you can see with what R&R Frames does is they come in and they build a tranny mount for a 4L60 or a 4L80, whichever one you're running. They drop the front subframe in the front and the motor mounts, and you're good to go. And then on the body of the car, the body actually sits on the factory perches that were on here. So these are the factory body mounts, and then we just went back on, of course, with new bushings and stuff like that. This is all C4, the C4 sway bar in the back. The dog bones here. This rear end right here is the Dana 44, which is in the 5-speed C4 cars. This is the one you want to do right here because they're pretty tough. I've put a lot of horsepower to this rear end and it's lived. I'm not saying it's going to live forever, but it's doing pretty good. They made a 36 and a 44. This is the 44. But this is pretty much the underneath of the car. There's not a lot to it. It's pretty basic really, but it handles so good on the road with this independent rear suspension. This thing corners like you can't believe. So it actually runs really good. It's a fun car to drive around. So speaking of that, let's go drive it. Air conditioning blowing right now, freezing me out. It's probably 105 here today in Vegas. Car corners like a brand new car. Steering on it is great. The way that the suspension holds to the road is it's like driving a brand new car, really. You know, this car's come a long ways from when I first got it. You know, the old 57 Chevys, they had a ton of body roll in them. When you would turn a corner, they had a lot of body roll. This car sits on the ground now. If you're going down the road and you make a corner, it makes the corner. It doesn't mess around. It's definitely drivable. But it's one of those cars that'll surprise you when you're cruising around. You know, you're just out driving and you know, it looks like an old rusty car, but you pull up next to somebody in it, they hear that camshaft and the turbo whistling out the side of the exhaust. They know I mean business. It's kind of like a fighter. When you walk into a place, you know a fighter because he's got big old cauliflower ears, right? You don't want to mess with him. So that's kind of how you feel about this car when you hear it run. It gives off that vibe like, look, I'm going to kick your ass. And that's what's so awesome about driving this car around. I mean, it's not the fastest car on the street probably, but it's one of them, I can tell you that. You know, the great thing about this old car, when you look out over the hood of this car, it just makes you feel like you're in the 50s or the 60s, you know what I mean? And I think that's what makes it so fun to get in this car and drive it around is, you know, the feeling of feeling like, you know, maybe the 60s, you know, when they were hot rodding these cars. You know, by the 60s they were, you know, modifying the motors, they were stroking a small block, they were making them run a little harder, putting superchargers and blowers on them. You know, so you know, it really kind of gives you that feel like you want to just go cruising to the hop, pull up, the girl roller skates out, puts a TV tray on the side of your window, and you drink a milkshake and hang out with your girl. But you know, it sucks times aren't really like that anymore, but just the thought of it always is going through my head. And you know, the stories of my mom and dad. You know, my dad had a 57 Chevy when he was in high school, and he dated my mom in that, and then my mom had a 56 Chevy. It was a Sierra Gold and the Ivory White 56 Chevy. And you know, I used to hear all the stories of them cruising Fremont Street back in, you know, the 60s. And, you know, those memories always stuck with me. And, you know, I've always loved cars because of that. So now I got my own car and I get to go out and cruise it and have fun. So pretty cool memories. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed my little episode of my 57 Chevy. Look, this is one of my favorite all-time cars, and if you guys have anything that you'd like to share or comment, please do. I want to know about your grandpa's 57 Chevy, your dad's, yours. I want to hear the story. I love hearing the stories about these old cars because they are a piece of iconic American history, and they're just cool. So make sure you do that. Make sure you like and subscribe to our page. I'm going to be putting out these videos weekly. So make sure you get on there, you like and subscribe, share with your friends. I'd like them to get on here. Look, we're all car people. We all love cars. So that's what this is all about. Thanks guys for watching. We'll see you next time.